Okay, good evening, everybody. Um, this is Kathy at Autistic Girls Network, and we are delighted to host the launch, or the online launch, I should say, of Eliza Fricker's new book, Thumbsucker. So I am going to hand over to Eliza first of all. We're just gonna keep it very, very casual tonight. We're gonna have a bit of a chat. And then we will take questions at the end. So save up your questions. Don't put them in the chat yet, because otherwise I will never find them because I'm on my own tonight. I don't have any helpers tonight. So save them till the end, and then you can race to type as fast as you can to put them all in the chat, and we will deal with them all at the end. Okay, so I'm going to hand over now to Eliza, who can perhaps the best way to start would be to kind of give a general introduction to kind of why you started writing books at all, because Thumbsucker is not your first book, is it?
No, it is my third solo book. I've done a few with other people. No, I started writing because I was writing, well, the first one was about PDA,
Shall we
pathological
say shall we say what PDA stands for, just in case?
pathological demand avoidance. So that was a sort of lighter illustrated book for families, to help them sort of understand a bit more about it and perhaps use some different approaches that I'd found kind of helpful. And then my second one was Can't Not Won't, which was about navigating the education system with an autistic child, and that did really well. That was a Sunday Times bestseller, which was actually out in, I think it was February this year. And then Thumbsucker is my third book and is about my own undiagnosed autistic childhood, and I'm sort of using the names that I was called as a child growing up, and then using those names to kind of align with the different experiences that I'd had and perhaps why I was called those names. But I suppose trying to get a more, which is what I do with all my work, is try and get a kind of more empathetic response from people, really, to try and see it a different way.
Yeah, yeah. So presumably you did suck your thumb.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a section in there about that. Yeah, yeah, I did.
How I only ask this because I'm really interested, because my sister was a very, very heavy thumb sucker. My sister, whose two boys are both autistic, is a very, very heavy thumb sucker, to the point of kind of having these cloths, and her thumb would go through, eventually would go through the cloths that she was holding. Yeah, so what age did you suck your thumb until?
I was, I think, about 18 when I stopped. And I had my nan had bought me this white soft toy of a lamb when I was born, and I sucked my thumb with this lamb, and it was just a grey rag in the end. But it, to me, had the most delicious smell you can ever imagine. And I used to suck my thumb and have this here that looked like a rag. And there's a bit in Thumbsucker where we're on holiday and my dad's trying to find this because it, used to get chucked out. Like, we were on holiday and the cleaner of the apartments chucked it out. So it's my dad going through the bin and me distraught as to where this has gone. And eventually, I think it was my first grossy boyfriend that threw it out after an argument, and that was the end of me sucking my thumb. Really, it lost its enjoyment after that. So,
I thought you were going to say that was the end of the boyfriend.
well, it was pretty much the end of all of, all of it. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So, what was it, do you think? Maybe it's different with hindsight, but what was it, do you think, that made you start writing in the first place? Or maybe go back further than that. What was it that started the missing the mark illustrations in the first place?
Rage, I would say,
Rage
probably.
Against the Machine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've talked about it before, but it was quite it's quite visceral, isn't it, when it's your child being misunderstood. So I think it was it was a it was rage, but it was also a way of me processing those experiences, because when you're in those sort of high stress situations, well, certainly for me as well, I just, I can't process it in that moment. So it was really therapeutic, and it felt much more empowering than sending angry emails that, no one cared, really. Ultimately, it wasn't going to change the system, even though I wanted it to. So it was that, I suppose it was my huge sense of injustice, and it was my way to say, no, look, this is how it was actually. And using humor as well in that is really important to me. I think it brings things down, and it brings that hierarchy down. My dad was a political cartoonist. Using that wit really kind of pulls down a little bit of that power structure, and that was really important for me, to show the nonsense of a lot of that stuff. So yeah, rage, therapy, empowering, all those things.
And I'm sure that you get a lot of people contacting you to say how much it all resonates. I know when I read Can't Not Won't, your second book, it is your second book, isn't it? I'm not going mad. Yeah. I know I kind of almost, and my child is not diagnosed PDA, although she is fairly demand avoidant. Almost every page I'm turning it thinking, yeah, that's us, that's us, that's us. And I know a lot of people say that to me when I give talks on behalf of Autistic Girls Network. I get an awful lot of women coming up. It usually is women, not always, coming up afterwards and saying, that really resonated with them, about their child, or about, of course, themselves, because an awful lot of autistic parents discover that they're autistic once their child is being assessed.
And I think that's probably, I talked about that actually when I did my in-person launch the other night, that I think that was probably quite an early feeling for me, was going back into those school buildings and those. I mean, I cannot, on a sensory level, and well, multiple levels, I cannot stand being in a school environment, a hospital environment, any kind of generic sterile office. For me, put me in a room full of even chintzy furniture and pictures of kittens or whatever, but do not put me in a sterile office. I cannot bear it. And so for me, even going into those rooms was just, for meetings, was just excruciating. And I cannot cope with that sort of I can't cope with bureaucracy, official stuff, all of it. I can't bear it. So that for me was probably that first sense of going into that place and really thinking, right, do not let your guard drop here, really keep it together, and don't let anyone see the real you in this.
So that's something that comes up quite a lot for us, is that almost, the gaslighting that people have experienced if they were, or if they are autistic and obviously unrecognized at school, and that that stress at going back into that environment, and that then almost incapability to be able to deal with it because of this huge amount of stress that you're put under.
Yeah, and it's still there even today. I mean, when I did the Rethinking Ed conference a few months ago, we did that in a school, and I wasn't going in there for any other reason that people wanted to hear what I had to say. It was a welcoming place to be, but it wasn't for me, because I was going back into a school, and it's so in me that I have to switch it on in that environment. I kick into survival mode. It's been there from when I was in school myself, so it's very challenging for me to re-enter those places.
Okay, is now a good time for you to do a little reading?
Yeah. Do you want me to do a bit of the introduction?
Yeah. I think you should do whatever bit that you'd like to do,
Well,
but
we
yeah,
can read a bit because the diagnosis letter is really nice at the end, but maybe we kind of do that a bit later.
yeah.
This book tells the story of growing up different. It takes ownership of the names I was called. I now know that those names weren't nice and only taught me to hide my difficulties more. I grew up feeling ashamed and questioning who I was. It was exhausting, it was confusing, I hid myself. I wasn't doing it on purpose. I was actually finding lots of things really hard and exhausting. Those names didn't help, they just made me feel bad. But I feel passionate about not just accepting this and not accepting some of the roles that pigeonhole and define the female experience in particular. Now I want to say just because that's how it was then doesn't mean it was okay. We can say this together. It might be hard to acknowledge, but the sky won't fall down. We can rewrite our own narratives, forgive those who didn't know or understand, and teach those who are in a position to do better, to try harder, to listen.
Okay. I'm just leaving a little bit of silence there. I think we all can digest that and process that. Was often people write their book introductions after they've written the whole book. So did you write that at the end, or was that what you were thinking about the whole time you wrote the book?
It was what I was thinking about, and there's quite a hefty essay at the end with Dr. Naomi Fisher, and she talks about the importance of that, rewriting your narrative and rewriting your story. And I think that's something that's really important for us late diagnosed autistic people, that we were often very much told who we were and who we should be. And so this was very important for me, that was what I was doing. I was rewriting this. You said that I ruined those summer holidays, but actually this is what it was like for me.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really powerful, isn't it? And I think, I don't know, we're in a different time, aren't we, really, now, where I think that parents are maybe allowed to think more. It's not children must be seen and not heard anymore. Well, hopefully it's not anyway. Parents are allowed to be more accommodating to their children. You still get you're spoiling them, you must give them consequences, you must do this, you must do that. We still get a lot of that, but it is a different world, isn't it, to what it was 30 years ago. And so therefore I think, I don't know, parents are allowed to be more gentle. We've got a request that you be able to hold, not that I'm stopping you, that you hold up some of your illustrations. Do you want to do that and maybe talk us through some?
Yeah, we can do that.
You can tell that we haven't planned this at all. we're just completely
Well, I'm just
going
thinking
by the.
about what I showed the other night, so we could show some of those. They could be quite good. So I think this was one that people have really related to, that I've been showing, which is so this one's called Hypochondriac. So this is preparing for weeks to do a play at school, and I'm getting closer to the day of the play and my anxiety is heightening. So there's my friend saying, oh, look, it's the dance tomorrow night. And I'm saying, I like your skirt, and I'm picking away because I'm getting really anxious. And then actually I get to a point and I can't do it. And I say that I'm ill. And when I say that I'm ill, I often was ill. And this is something I talk to a lot of women in consults who talk about this, the amount of tonsillitis and glandular fever. It manifests physically for us eventually. We can't
Absolutely.
keep doing that. So that's me under a blanket watching Sons and Daughters. And we did make a joke about this at the event the other night, because there's this sort of some professionals have a tendency to say that we make it too comfortable for our children at home. That's why they're not going into school, take their PlayStation away. Me and my friend were joking, saying, we didn't have anything. This was the 80s. We
Yes,
had
we didn't
we
have a
we had
PlayStation.
sons and daughters to watch on telly. It
We had
wasn't
three
that fun
TV
at home,
channels.
believe. Yeah. So
Yeah,
we were, if you think that it's because it was fun, really, it's yeah. But it was that I think those days were either subliminally chosen or they chose us, those burnout days, where we just couldn't manage it. I had a lot of days off school, a
yeah.
lot.
It's a shame though, isn't it, that even now that kind of physical manifestation of anxiety is so poorly understood. Not very many years ago, only a few years ago, my daughter was hospitalized 3 times in a year for stomach issues, that of course they had to investigate because it might have been appendicitis or something, and she was discharged with something different each time. But now we know that it was anxiety. That's what it was. And she was rolling around the floor in absolute agony, taken off in a ambulance.
Yeah.
That's how physical it was.
Mm,
And this is happening all the time, still now. And yet
mm.
there's still no understanding. Nobody in that hospital, of all the staff she saw, all the 3 times, I think she must have been in for, I don't know, 9 days altogether. Nobody said to us, maybe this is anxiety. Is everything okay? I think they did ask us, is everything okay at school? But she was a champion masker. So, yeah, as far as we was concerned, everything was okay at school.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in
Mm.
that sense, not much has changed.
No, and I think that was what was really interesting when I went through the diagnosis process. So I went to a neuroaffirmative place for my diagnosis, and it was 3-hour-long sessions, and they were more like therapy sessions. And by this stage, I'd sort of said that I was self-diagnosing, and I was sort of saying to friends, I don't think I need to have an official diagnosis. I'm sort of accepting of who I am. But actually, because it was so exploratory, it was it really went to those difficult places and unpicked them, which I hadn't previously done. And that was quite interesting to actually go with that and realize what sort of level of distress that I had been at times had been there in my life. But weirdly, even with that, with those 3, as when I was doing the assessment, the first one, she had to go back to her senior and say that she wasn't sure she could carry on with me because it was so difficult for me to speak, because it was an official thing. I became quite situationally mute and found it really difficult to speak in that first one. So it took a little while for me to get going, even with this, even with someone who is understanding of that. It's just being in something official for me is really challenging.
Mm-hmm. Let's talking of challenges. Why don't we talk a little bit about PDA,
Mm.
without having to call it something pathological, and talk us through your books that concentrate more on PDA.
What do you want to know?
Well, let's imagine that there are people on this call and people who are going to watch it when we put it on YouTube later who don't know what PDA is, and
Mm.
don't know why, for example, the majority of children with PDA are not in school, and just take it from there.
Well, if we change the name to Pervasive Drive for Autonomy, it's a need to feel a sense of autonomy, to feel safe and to feel in control. It's funny actually. I'm as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking so differently from how I would have talked about it even a few years ago, because I feel so differently about it now, because we're out of those systems, those environments that are so impactful. It's a very different presentation, and I think that's what's really difficult, because when you're explaining PDA in the context of if you have a child in school, you're really kind of seeing a very difficult situation. You're seeing things that are very difficult. You're seeing a child who is very spiky, who really needs to control a lot of things, who has a lot of meltdowns. You probably, as a parent will feel like your life is quite out of your control, because you probably feel you've got this child who needs to control everything, and you are doing what you're told you're meant to do as a good parent TM, as Naomi Fisher and I have now called it, and you're doing things like putting more structure in, and you've got a whiteboard and you've got an egg timer, and it's actually getting even worse because you're putting all these things in.
If you're putting all these demands in, yeah.
Putting all the demands in. So actually what you do need to thrive as a PDA person is you need to feel you need to feel that sense of safety and autonomy, and a non-hierarchical setup is going to work, whether that's school or home. So you have to work very collaboratively, using indirect language. That's the way that it will work for someone who is PDA. And actually, once you create that kind of really safe, it's not a kind of benign neglect. What you're doing is you're creating a lot of safety, but you're doing it very much in a relationship that's non-hierarchical and very collaborative. Then actually, you won't see a lot of this stuff. A lot of the stuff you read about PDA is really, really grim, but that's because you're working with the constraints of trying to fit into kind of an environment that is impactful, i.e. school. But actually it's about creating a life that works for you, and it won't look probably like that life that you thought it was going to look like. I know a lot of people with a PDA profile. I think actually probably I do have a PDA profile myself. I like working for myself. I don't like going into a work environment. It doesn't work for me either.
I've worked from home for 21 years now.
Have you?
Yes. And I'm very glad about it, yes.
Yeah. So I think
I don't think that I'm PDA, but yes, I have.
Yeah. But it's creating the world that works for you. And that's why I feel massively grateful for having my daughter, because I wouldn't be here doing this. I'd probably still be trying to fit this really fairly ordinary life, and it crushing me, to be honest. It's given me the chance to explore myself and have a life that works for me. We're all doing much better doing things this way.
Yeah. What do you say to people who talk about manipulation? This comes up a lot in our Facebook group. Oh, it's not usually the parent who says it, it's they've been told that their child is manipulating them. In fact, it came up a couple of nights ago. I was running training at a school, and it came up with a parent said that she wasn't sure. Some maybe family had said to her, my child is manipulating me. Yeah, so
But then you're
try to
negating.
reframe that. But yeah, what do you say to that?
Well, I say it's anxiety, and I think that I relate to that myself. If I feel it's out of my control, that's why I don't like going to, dinner parties, because I don't know what food I'm going to get. I don't want to sit there and eat at the time that I'm told to eat. That's all anxiety. It's when things are taken out of control and you've lost that autonomy. That's why, things like Christmas, absolutely can't bear Christmas. What a load of nonsense. What we do all this prep to eat a roast potato. And no interest in it at all. I'm quite happy with my family, and we can have a nice time when we want. I don't need someone to tell me when to do it. And I can, even saying it now, I can feel that rage coming up in me. Because it's someone telling me how to do something when I'm quite sure of how I want to do things and have a nice time. I don't need to be told how to do that.
And there's that pressure, isn't there? Which, it could be family, it could be friends, it could be, fellow school mums. That pressure that this is what you do at Christmas, and this is how you do it. And this is what you must do. And you must go and see great Auntie Ethel, and you must give her a kiss, and you must smile when you open her present while she's looking at you, and all of those things.
And also, it's really, to me as well, I think there's an inauthenticity about that. It doesn't feel genuine. I would rather see someone when I really want to see them and have a nice time. I don't want to do something because I'm ticking a box. That's not real to me. So again, that's another element of it. But also, like we showed with the day off school, that's what happens when that pressure mounts. That's not manipulation. That's because we've tried to do that stuff that we've been told we need to do, like the school play, and eventually it becomes too much for us to manage it.
Mm, mm. Okay. Where shall we go next? Do you want to read
Well, I've got the
the
difficult
next
one. I
bit?
think that one went down quite well if I can find it. Do you remember that one that posted it? Difficult, which I
Yeah,
think
it's difficult.
I think a lot of parents. It was this one with me sitting looking, and difficult was a name I was called quite a lot actually. I didn't want to ruin days out or spoil holidays. I didn't want those meltdowns to be remembered more than the sun or the beach or the time we had a villa and a pool. I wanted to have a good time, but I knew I was the one who spoilt stuff, who made others sad, angry, and upset. I confused people and I disappointed them. Why couldn't I just eat the sandwich? It was cheese and bread just like I have at home, but it wasn't. It tasted different, and I was already tired, sunburnt, confused, and anxious. I didn't do it on purpose. It wasn't because I didn't want to have a nice time. I didn't want to upset you. It wasn't just the cheese sandwich. It was all too much. And I think that goes back to that manipulation thing, doesn't it? You know, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, and it goes back to Christmas as well, because what is Christmas dinner apart from that metaphorical cheese sandwich?
Mm.
And and that's why it's really so important that families, neurodivergent families should be able to have the Christmas that they want to have. This is obviously a very topical conversation now because Christmas is not very far away. I don't know. I'm not going to say how many days Christmas is because I have no idea. Although actually I could work it out quite easily, really, couldn't I? But yes, please, please, please have the Christmas that your family is comfortable having. Your
Mm.
family in your house, not your extended family.
Mm.
Actually, why don't I bet we've got an awful lot of autistic people on here tonight. Why don't you put down what is your ideal Christmas food? We can talk about that because that might be quite interesting. We have a blog on our website which talks about pizza and it there being nothing wrong with having pizza for Christmas dinner. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with having pizza for Christmas dinner. Oh, Pete has pizza for Christmas dinner. Fabulous. Fabulous. I'm totally in favour of having pizza for Christmas dinner. Although actually I don't think I've ever had pizza for Christmas dinner because my family quite like roast dinners. So it works out quite well,
Yeah,
really.
no, I mean, I love a roast potato. I
Yeah.
mean, there's I think we talked about it before, but this was something we brought up the other night was the we've talked about ARFID before, haven't we? I
Yeah.
think.
That's
But
okay. We can talk about it again.
there's quite a bit in here about food in here. So this was my diet actually. My favourite food was a salad cream sandwich with salt and vinegar crisps.
Oh, the days of salad cream. Yeah.
I still have it all the time.
Very 70s for some reason, salad cream, isn't it?
Yeah. But then the sort of trying to eat in other places, eating at a friend's house or eating a meal out. I was actually really lucky that I would say my parents were like the original low demand parents, I have to say. There were things that obviously they found difficult, like the meltdowns. They didn't understand those, the overwhelm. But they were very laid back about a lot of things. So things like food, which was, such a difficult thing. School milk. I was in school milk era as well when you got warm cartons of milk.
Oh, yes, disgusting. Yes.
So they were really good at just letting me eat this really kind of basic diet that I had and not put pressure on. And I eat a pretty varied diet now. And I think that saved me actually, knowing that really for me home, and this is what I talk about anyway a lot in my work, and was very much I came from my parents because home for me was absolutely my safe space. My dad was always around. He was there to walk me to and from school. I hung out with him all the time. I co-regulated with him all the time. They let me just eat what I wanted to eat. They mucked about at home, seemed to have quite a good time just mucking. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't have days out. I mean, this was the 1980s. A trip to the dump was the highlight of going anywhere. But, you know, I always felt like it was all right to just muck about and be at home. And that really, really helped me. And that was something when my daughter had her breakdown, I really went back to that and remembered what my dad was like and that sort of enthusiasm that he could come up with in the home and make jokes and silly games. And they really did help me enormously in that sense. I didn't ever feel there was pressure from them to do well at school or to, you know, go off to university or even eat at the table, you know, and that really helped.
There's people in the chat saying that Christmas dinners that they had during COVID and during lockdown were the best for them. And of course, then you are in control of your own Christmas dinner destiny, aren't you? You know, you can
Yeah, a lot
have
of people
exactly
have
what you
said
want.
that, haven't they, about lockdown,
Mm,
that they actually quite enjoyed it.
mm, mm. I have to say, I didn't enjoy it because I really like seeing my parents at Christmas. But my parents, probably a little bit similar to yours. My parents have four autistic grandchildren, and you know, who knows how many neurodivergent adults. And my mum is like a Christmas miracle. She does everybody's favorite food. So she's got four autistic children with quite restricted eating. She's got two vegan, she's got one vegetarian, she's got two gluten free, and she will just cook. Everyone has what they want for Christmas dinner. I don't know how she does it really. I certainly don't want to do it. Please don't be all coming to my house for Christmas dinner.
But it's that, isn't it? It's doing things as well without the sigh, without the begrudging, without the sarky comments. You know, I think that's something that I really remember of my parents is, you know, I didn't feel like that with them. You know, I didn't feel that they were, you know, disappointed in me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Right. There's another a little spot you would like to read, I think, because there was another post-it note.
There's a couple,
I
I
took
think.
I took careful note of your post-it note.
Well, I was going to read, there's the diagnosis, there's a little bit from the diagnosis letter, and then there was a bit from Naomi Fisher that's really nice that we could read.
I think Naomi's here.
Is she?
I think so. Are you here, Naomi? She might have gone to make a cup of tea.
So in my diagnosis letter, they said, Dear Eliza, you shared with me your insight, openness, and creativity. I was delighted to hear about your passion for writing and drawing. Thank you for providing me with such in-depth and nuanced information about yourself now and in the past. On Zoom, we explored your life experiences and individual traits, which helped me to understand you and your perspective on the world. You have clearly worked exceptionally hard to reach where you have in your life, while dealing with additional challenges that other people do not have to deal with. You've created a life that you can thrive in, working to your strengths in creativity and surrounding yourself with understanding and kind people. I hope with this improved self-understanding, you will continue to thrive in life. So very different from a deficit-based.
Yeah, very different. Wow.
So yeah, there's just this little bit that Naomi's written quite a big essay at the back, but I think this bit's really nice that she wrote. As women think back over their lives and as they watch their children grow in their own lives, many of them start to rediscover the parts of them which got lost along the way. They realised that as they were growing up, they had to squash parts of themselves that they were pushed to conform to a mould they didn't fit. And when it didn't fit, they felt the problem was them, not the mould or the pressure. They felt blamed for their lack of what they saw as conventionality, blamed for their difference to everyone else, and they absorbed this into themselves. Their story became they were not good enough, that there was something wrong with them. The diagnosis provides a new story. It can allow them to accept their differences are just part of who they are. The diagnosis gives them a different way to think about themselves, and that can feel liberatory. It provides a way out of the blame. Many women feel that a diagnosis allows them to say, for the first time, this is who I am, rather than I shouldn't be like this.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Okay. Right, we're going to start wrapping up our chat. So, is there anything else you would like to say in our chat before we start taking questions? Because I don't want to keep you past 9 o'clock.
No,
So,
I'm good. Let's do the chat.
okay. Right. So, if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask, please put them in the chat now. And we can talk about them. And yes, adult autism practice are extremely affirming. Amazing. Oh, they're getting very good reviews.
There's a lot about Christmas on here. You got everyone going with
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, it is quite topical, isn't it, at the moment? There was something put on Facebook somewhere. Do you know, I can't even remember if it was in our group or it was in a different group, um, about cellophane wrapping paper with, as in just sheets of cellophane, but with like snowflakes on. So you could wrap it up, but you could still see what it was. So if you didn't like surprises, you could still have a wrapped present. Not quite sure how I feel about that.
I'm not sure.
But I can see, that it might suit some people. Okay, we've got a question from Helen. It says, if you were diagnosed autistic as a child, how do you think your life would have been different?
I think there would be a lot less people pleasing through a big chunk of my life, because that's what happened with me. I became a massive people pleaser to the detriment of myself and a fauna. And the masking, I'm trying not to say this because it's negative, but I have to be honest, it actually does make me cringe when I look back at how I used to mask, because it was so full on. I mean, it was so exhausting. I probably did seem like a really full on person, I think, when I was out, so trying to sort of socialize when I was masking. Absolutely exhausting doing that. And what being diagnosed has allowed me to do is just be me now. That has been huge. And actually, it's made me much more confident, because the connections that I have now are people meeting me. So they're much more authentic. And I think people understand who I am. I think I was probably quite difficult to get a handle on before when I was masking, because it didn't really make sense. It didn't make sense to me. I don't think it made sense to other people when they met me. So
I think I think there's, to a certain extent, it comes with age, doesn't it? The kind of not giving a toss about things
yeah.
comes with age. The older you are, the less you worry about what people think about you.
Yeah. And there's been some big life changes in the last few years for me with my diagnosis, and it just feels like I'm finally living the life that I want to live. I had a really big fear, actually, and this is honestly true, that I couldn't survive on my own. I really didn't think I could, because I lived at home until I was married. So I lived with my parents. I didn't go to university. I lived at home, and then I got married. So I didn't think I could, I didn't know if I could live on my own, which I am now with a teenager. But I can, I had this, honestly, it was an innate fear I wouldn't survive, because I
But you
didn't know
did.
who I was,
Yeah, you didn't have the fullness of your identity,
No.
basically. Okay, we've got quite a few more questions now. I need to go back and find them all. What would you say to parents who failed to provide the safe space because they were made to feel that they were indulging their manipulative child?
What would I say to parents?
Yeah,
Um,
who were made to feel that way.
I mean, if that was my parents, what would I say to them?
I think they just mean in general. What would you say to some parents who didn't provide that safe space, but it was because they were made to feel
Yeah, I mean,
How
I'm
it's
not
been
saying my
maybe.
parents were by any means perfect at all. But I think that's something, doing this work and writing this, or, people go to therapy, don't they? This is a way that you can forgive your family for those things. We don't know. I didn't, I've had to forgive myself. I didn't know about PDA when I started parenting. I had to parent very differently later on. I think it's really important that we always give people a chance.
Mm.
Um, once we've explained ourselves, um, to those people who perhaps, always give people a chance, because all of us are winging it all the time.
Yeah, you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How do you begin to remove the mask when you've done it for so long?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I think finding those people, for me, other people who are autistic, but then actually, I'm saying that, I think most of my friends were, which is probably why I gravitated towards them growing up as well. I think just finding those genuine connections, really. I don't know, it's a difficult one. I found it was quite easy with my diagnosis. It just happened over time, really. I don't know, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I do think you have to kind of let it take whatever time it takes, because it's taken a very long time for you to get to that stage. And
Mm,
it's not just going to all disappear overnight. In fact, some of it may never disappear
mm,
because it may not feel safe ever to not mask in certain situations. And that's
mm.
okay as long as you're in control of it.
Yeah.
That's the point, isn't it? If you're making a conscious decision there, that's what you're going to do for a short time. And then you're going to come back and you're going to be kind to yourself and you're going to do, whatever things make you, gain more energy or whatever it is. You're really going to use energy accounting and you're going to be kind to yourself basically.
Mhm.
Then you can cope with it. It's when it's enforced or it's when you feel like you have to do it all the time that
Yeah.
is really the issue, isn't it? Okay, the next question is quite a long one. I'm going to read it all out, but then if you need it repeating, then I'll repeat it. And this person says, I don't think I'm spoiling my children, nor do I think they are manipulating me. But honestly, sometimes I feel resentful about how much flexibility I have to have, but I can never expect that kind of flexibility from my children. Sometimes it feels like I have nothing left to give. I know they need that from me. I know I'm doing the right thing with low demand, and I'm proud of how my kids know themselves so well and advocate for themselves, but I am tired. How can I find the resilience for myself?
And I think it's really important to say that as well. I think I think Naomi and I spoke about this on our last webinar. We were almost fearful, aren't we, of saying this stuff? And I think it's really important to say it. Parenting is boring. I mean, I joke, I've got a really old friend, and our children are the same age, and we've, raised them together. And we say, God, isn't it boring? We've always said it, isn't this boring? Say it out loud. It is okay to say that. We joke, oh, we'd have all this money to spend on nice shoes if we hadn't had children. Who had this idea to have children? Say it. It's okay to say this stuff. And I think this is a part of, that low demand parenting that is very difficult. It requires you to continually pull it out the bag. And no human has, endless resources. And so, we are going to get to the end of our tether at times with it. That's the reality. Sometimes it can be an indication to change things up. In our case, when things got really plateaued for both of us, we did have to sort of change what we were doing quite a bit. But other times it is just inanely boring. Could I go back to that time when I was at home? I would do it. Would have to, but do I ever want to do it again? No.
Yep. Okay. And yeah, without giving too much away, I can completely agree with that. Okay, so the next question is, what is the best bit of advice to give? Sorry, I'll start again. What's the best bit of advice would you give to undiagnosed teenage girls in today's world?
Find your people. And I think those people, I had some really good friends who, it was really moving when I did my in-person event this week, because there were people there that I've known a long time, and those people are really important to me and have been really accepting. I know at times I, you know, wasn't the easiest person, but I had my people, and I've always gravitated towards that. I've always gravitated towards that really close one-to-one friendship, and still do. They're really important to me. So I think it's that if you're a lot of that stuff that if we model that stuff, our children learn a lot from that. I've still got, friends from when I was 14 who stay over here, and we still share a bed and watch rubbish telly, and my daughter sees that, and I think that's really nice for her to see me have those connections, and connection is everything. We just need those people who understand us, really. We can, if our family don't, we can make our own.
Yeah, and probably also important to say that it's not just face-to-face connections, online connections can be just as important, even if they're not in the same country or
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. The next one says, can you comment on the intense pain and distress, if you experience this, of having a diagnosis as an adult when it feels too late and you may have had a lot of trauma in the neurotypical world?
Yeah, that's difficult, isn't it? I don't feel like I can answer that really, because that wasn't my experience of it. For me, it was really quite liberating. So, that's difficult, but I guess, that is a really important point for some people. That's going to bring up a lot of things, isn't it? If you get that late diagnosis and you've not had, a great time of it, or some really bad things, that's going to be a lot to unpick. I would say that some of the really good, where I had my diagnosis, we were offered therapy after, and I'm still seeing my therapist from there 2 years on. And I never could connect with therapy before, but my therapist is also autistic, ADHD, and has literally seen me through all of this. And I think that can be really, really helpful, because they do understand it, and they do understand trauma. A lot of us have trauma from just experiencing the world very differently. So I would say that can be really, really helpful. And it's a really safe place to put that stuff when perhaps it isn't as easy to do that with friends or family.
Yeah, and of course, all the more reason why we need so many more neurodivergent therapists and professionals in general. Oh, and here is one actually. So the next question is from Christine, who's in Canada, and she says, I'm researching the perimenopause and the mask just won't stay put anymore. There seem to be more safe spaces in the UK.
I don't even want to talk about perimenopause. Like I'm feeling all right at the minute, and then because I get the anxiety about always thinking about the next thing, I'm already like, don't even think about that. That's like round the corner potentially.
Yeah, well, I am probably in menopause, and menopause and ADHD, I can tell you, it's like it destroys your brain.
Oh no.
So yes, my brain is like little bits of Swiss cheese.
And I think that,
I've talked to Christine about this before, so
oh, okay. But
we
I
might
think
we
this
might
is a
do
real,
something on menopause soon.
and as a wider issue, health stuff in general,
Yeah.
we need really much better health systems in place for autistic people. I mean, navigating that system, being even in those places for me is, absolutely terrifying. So yeah, we definitely need to make these places. I mean, Stephen Paul just talks about it, doesn't he, quite a lot, the polyvagal person, about how we need to create these environments that feel safe for us from the beginning to.
Yeah, I couldn't say whether we have more safe spaces in the UK because I don't know how many there are in Canada. I don't know. It doesn't feel like we have that many safe spaces in the UK, but
No.
maybe it's better. Must feel better to Christine.
Oh, autisticmenopause.com. I'm looking that up.
Well, I'm already meant to have arranged our next webinar on menopause, but I've been a bit
Okay.
rubbish about it. Probably due to my own menopause, to be honest. Okay, the next question says, I am 40 and self-diagnosed, awaiting NHS assessment for autism and ADHD, but I still really struggle to not give a toss. Yes, just wait till you get a bit older. I really do, even though I don't want to. I also think back on my life until this point and really struggle to cope with how bad things have been. Any tips?
Um, I mean, I suppose this is why I write and draw, is to kind of write it again. And Naomi talks about that as a trauma therapist at the back of the book, and I mentioned it earlier. It's rewriting these narratives for ourselves, can be really, really helpful. But it is, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to go back and look at those experiences and actually admit how difficult they were. I kind of do a combination, I think. I kind of do a drawing and writing about the past. I do a lot of writing that doesn't get put out there, just personally for myself. Therapy, a lot of exercise, and then always looking forward quite positively. I don't know if that maybe is my ADHD, but I'm quite keen to always add in that novelty and keep pushing forward with exciting new things. It kind of then balances it out for
Yeah,
me.
maybe that is the benefit of being ADHD, maybe that your brain kind of wants to do all the things and therefore you tend to perhaps be less stuck and less fixed on what has happened. Maybe that is just me. I don't know.
Mm. I'm
But
just
yeah,
picturing, because I'm a visual communicator, I'm just picturing another cartoon I could do, which could be my boyfriend in a tin hat waiting for the fallout from that, because he's often going, oh no, don't do another thing, because then you'll have a massive burnout and yeah.
yes. Never knowingly underworked is what I call it. Okay. Right. The next question is, do you mind me asking how you dealt with disclosing your diagnosis to family and friends?
Um, yeah, I think most were pretty good with it actually. Most were quite understanding. I put up a quote just now actually before we came on, that my dad, and I put it as a slide in my presentation the other night. My dad said, I texted him to tell him, and he said, "Who wants to be neurotypical anyway? They're all a bunch of nutters." And that was his way of sort of saying, "Brilliant, you've got your diagnosis." I think I texted people if I thought it was going to be difficult and give them some time. I think the most difficult ones are the ones when they said things like, "Well, how do you know you are? What makes you autistic?" Do you find that really like? Well, why do you think you are then? What makes you autistic? And I'm
To be
thinking, oh
honest, I tend not to engage with conversation.
no,
But
really,
I
though.
am I'm maybe further on in my don't give a toss stage.
Yeah. Those were really annoying, but no, I think most people are quite understanding, and a lot of people want to explore it for themselves as well and talk about it then.
I think
Um,
people are a bit more open-minded now. Of course, you're always going to get some who completely disprove that statement, but I think in general, people are becoming more open-minded and more, open to the possibility of experience the world in a different way
hmm.
than they do.
I haven't had anyone be really dismissive, I don't think. Not that I can think of.
Which is good.
Mm.
The next is not really a question, but it's going back to what we were talking about feeling guilty about how you parented before. And
Mm.
this person says they have a huge amount of guilt about how they parented for years and thanks us for talking about our experiences. And I would say, I didn't say at the time, but yeah, absolutely. I've got things that I'm not happy about at all that I used to do. I can
Yeah.
remember I can remember like almost shouting at my son to look me in the eye when he was talking to me. I can remember doing that.
Mm.
And, now, of course, it's horrible, horrible, cringeworthy stuff.
Mm.
Um, but at the time, that's what you were supposed to do. Not necessarily not shout at your son, but you were supposed to look someone in the eye when you talked to them. And that was one thing that he could never do in very different, both my children present very, very differently.
Mm.
Um, and I'm sure that there's, huge amount. I could probably write a very long list of all the awful things that I've done,
Mm.
but you have to apologize and you have to move on and you have to forgive yourself because it doesn't help anybody
No.
to keep feeling
And
guilty.
I think, like you said, that's a really important thing, because I think often, I think otherwise you can have the potential to stay entrenched in those bad ways that you did it before, and so to sort of be able to forgive yourself, say sorry, move forward, allows you to do things differently as well.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what matters. Well, obviously, if you've done awful things, obviously you apologize for them. But what matters is what you're going to do in the future.
Mm,
Um, Carrying on doing the same thing
mm,
cannot
yeah,
work. So,
mm, mm.
okay. Right. So next question, and we're just going to take a couple more. The next question is, how have you handled facing any internalized ableism in your personal journey of self-accepting autism PDA? Asking from my own place of grief in my journey.
Yeah, might have to help me with that one. So you mean like if I've things that I think my own self prejudice that I've had towards myself.
Yeah, I think so. And we might have partially covered this.
Yeah, because someone said something, I mean, I don't know who they were on Twitter the other day. I think I said something about being sociable, and they were like, that's your internal ableism because you're autistic, you can't be sociable, which I found really odd, a really odd thing to say. Because I
Well,
think,
there's a lot of misconceptions, aren't there?
yeah, and I always say that we're still products of our own culture and environment. I'm not just an autistic person, I'm still me. And yeah, I don't, I thought that was quite an odd thing to say, but I don't know. I suppose there's still sometimes I think there's still elements that still there to figure out, and I think that's partly though being autistic and ADHD. So going back to the social element, I thrive off interacting with other humans, but I'm still trying to work out how much of that I can cope with, and sometimes I push it too far, and it's because I want to be able to do certain things, and that sometimes will backfire on me.
Mm, mm. But the important thing is that you're in control of it.
Yeah,
That's the important thing. Always, always, always,
mm,
autonomy is the
yeah,
important
yeah.
thing.
Mm.
Okay, right. I think that was the last actual proper question. And it is 9 o'clock, so I am gonna draw a line there. So show us the book because we are here
Your
for a book
post-it
launch.
notes.
And Thumbsucker is now available. You can now buy it, I believe, from your favorite bookseller,
Bookseller.
whoever that may be.
Yeah.
And there, I presume you can buy it as a Kindle as well.
Yes.
And is there going to be an audio book? Would we not
Don't
know
know,
that?
actually. Don't know.
No. Yeah. Okay. And
I'd
is it?
know that if I read my contracts properly, wouldn't I?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. It might not be in the contract yet. And is it also published in the US and Canada?
I think so.
Christine could probably tell us if she
I'm doing
listens.
really well, aren't I? I don't know. It's here. I've got it. I mean,
And that's the important thing. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Eliza. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog who's now making very strange
no,
noises.
I can't.
Uh, and thank you, everybody else, for joining us.
Thank
Now,
you.
because it's not my own book, I can say go out and buy the book. I'd never be able to say that if it was my own book. Okay. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thanks a
And yes,
lot.
I will put this on YouTube. Yes, that was a question.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thanks.
Bye.